Hi, this is Kadija Dickens, and for my finance presentation, I'll be talking about the cost of college athletics and looking into the financial and social implications of intercollegiate athletics. To start the examination of the cost of athletics, we're going to first look at the extreme example of the University of California at Berkeley. In 2013, administration initially thought it wise to renovate their football stadium and to build a new sports performance center as a draw for potential student athletes and for a better overall student experience. From the very onset, there were disagreements between key stakeholders about the necessity of the project and how much cost the university should incur for this type of project. This, in addition to other legal challenges, created a complex system for achieving their goals for this capital project. Other incremental changes, like the athletic budget deficit of $22 million for the 2015 fiscal year and an existing debt service payment of $170 million, as well as the state cutting funding, made the project even more high risk with increased financial strain. With the addition of TV contracts, the project became the most expensive intercollegiate athletics capital project in the country, totaling $475 million. Taking into account the debt servicing over time, the total expenditures for this project could approach $1 billion. In the past 10 years, as a result of stories like that of UC Berkeley, there's been more scrutiny than ever on higher education institution athletic programs. While having a winning or losing program garners media attention, the most recent scrutiny and criticism comes in regard to the large amounts of money that universities expend in order to field athletic teams. According to 2017 NCAA data, the University of Texas at Austin spends the largest amount on their athletic programs. They are also one of the only few programs in the country that actually makes profit from their athletic programs. The University of Texas spends more than $300,000 per year per athlete. Their total athletic expenses were over $200 million for the year. Here's a list of some other athletic departments that are profitable. So most of these on this list, but these are absolutely not the norm in college athletics. At about 95% of institutions in the country, fielding athletic teams represents an increasingly large cost to the university. For an example, I chose Appalachian State University as a more normal example for the financial situation in college athletics. The table pictured here is from a study done in 2012 examining the revenues and expenditures within intercollegiate athletics. It gives total revenue amounts for football, men's basketball, women's basketball, and other sports combined. This table details the actual total operating expense for each program and the department as a whole. After examining the expenses, it can be seen plainly that every single sport is operating at a deficit. The entire athletic program has a higher expense than revenue total. In plain terms, the athletic department is not self-sufficient, and it'll inevitably cost the university. This table shows the generated revenues minus expenses for schools with NCAA sports within this sample of 164 schools. All sports outside of football and men's basketball represent a financial loss to the university. And this last table is the one that I believe to be the most impactful. In this particular study, 164 schools were examined. Only a fraction of all those institutions with athletic programs. However, a majority of what would be considered big-time schools with the highest levels of funding were used. Division 2 and 3 schools would fare far worse financially than any of these schools that were used for this sample. The data shows that only 15 athletic departments overall are profitable in the country. If most athletic programs are not profitable and generate no true revenue, the first major question to explore is this: where does the money come from for athletic programs? Almost all athletic departments rely on a combination of fees, their institutional allocation, state government allocations, and donations to subsidize their athletic programs. Student fees continue to be the most impactful and controversial means of funding athletic programs. While considered common practice and necessary, there is little to no oversight on the actualities of student athletic fees. There is also no way around avoiding these fees. According to a 2018 study on the growth of mandatory student athletic fees done by the University of Kentucky, the growth trajectory for student athletic fees is positive, meaning that they will increase, but that growth rate is slowing. That study also showed that on average, athletic fees account for less than 5% of the total athletic cost to an average student. A 2015 Washington Post article showed that students from only 32 schools in Power 5 conferences paid $125.5 million in athletic fees in a single year. The University of Virginia athletic director is quoted as saying, "Athletics is a common good, bringing people together, developing relationships, unifying the institution, and bringing fantastic exposure." The cost for that, the annual student athletic fee at University of Virginia in 2015 was $657. Another way that schools pay for the athletic departments is institutional allocations. Often, institutions allocate a certain amount of funding and aid to benefit the athletic department. It is worth noting that most institutional funds or subsidies come in the form of out-of-state waivers, Title IX tuition waivers, and funds from the state lottery. Very little actual cash is offered, but some is, from institutions to athletic departments, but they do provide overall aid. State government and donations. So this has become an increasingly important part of athletic department budgets. As spoken about in the text, state government funding and subsidies for higher education institutions have been declining in recent years. It is now more important than ever to court donors and for administrators to find new and creative ways to fund athletic departments. A growing concern for athletic departments is the sustainability of the costs and financing practices. A 2010 study performed by the NCAA and the Knight Commission on Intercollegiate Athletics indicated that less than a quarter of university presidents believe that athletic programs in the FBS in particular are sustainable in their current form. While there is recognition for the need for reform, there is no consensus for the best way to effect change. Almost all institution presidents believe that they need to collaboratively address costs and increase athletic transparency. What is often viewed as the biggest obstacle to sustainability is coaches increasing salaries, which are necessary to remain competitive. So the big question is, then why have athletic programs at all? If funding is becoming increasingly difficult and more taxing to the student, the most logical question is why have them at all? While it makes sense for Power 5 schools and their student experience, what compels smaller schools to continue with their athletic departments? So enhanced student experience and student activities are always the most common answers, but studies show that there are other tangible and intangible benefits to both the institution and local community. In 2005, the NCAA put out a publication that cited the little-known fact that student athletes actually graduate at higher rates than the average student body. The sustainability study of athletics highlighted other tangible benefits such as increased enrollment, increased applications, increased student body quality, and increased donations to the university. One surprising tangible benefit of athletic departments is the effect that it had on university rankings. While more applicable for public institutions, there is a small relationship between where the institution ranks and whether they compete in athletics and how much they win. Other tangible benefits, sort of tangible, but more intangible benefits, are exposure, local favor, and the fact that college football can unite diverse populations in a way that nothing else can. So the implications for athletic department administrators, the decline in funding and increase in costs represents a daunting and uncertain future. In the past year, it has become more and more common to hear of athletic departments cutting certain sports or cutting athletic department budgets. Even the worst case scenario is now becoming a reality for some of the universities who have opted to cut their athletic departments altogether. On an institutional level, this could mean less salary for athletic coaches and staff, and certainly less job security. On a national level, the current trends indicate that college athletics may only be a viable part of student life at universities who can afford to sustain a program that is costing them financially. Just within the last month, the University of New Mexico cut 4 athletic programs in order to control costs. Ole Miss reported an 8.5% budget cut. Washington State University reported a $100 million budget deficit, and Hiawassee College canceled athletics completely. On an institutional level, I think that this hurts programs in a major way. With occurrences like this, I can imagine that in the next 15 years, in order to cut costs, college athletics may not be considered an essential part of the college student's experience anymore. The financial crisis surrounding college athletics and higher education institutions is generally extremely nuanced and difficult to predict. Speaking as a college coach who is currently dealing with rising costs and lowering budgets, I do believe that there are several possible ways to buy time for athletic departments to figure out more permanent solutions to their problem. One possible solution, and probably the most obvious one, is to increase student athletic fees. While this ultimately benefits athletics, it taxes students who are already fighting student loans and rising tuition costs. Another solution would be for universities to cut sports who don't generate revenue. The problem with that is that at almost every institution, the revenue generating sports are men's basketball and football. It would be impossible to cut certain non-revenue sports and stay Title IX compliant. Another possible solution would be requiring coaches to increase their individual fundraising efforts for their programs. It might be sustainable for athletic programs to just budget for scholarship money for their athletes, but this would require a monumental effort on the staff members and may require the addition of a staff member to solely oversee fundraising efforts. Another possible solution would be to use graduate assistants in place of actual assistants. This could lower monetary costs, but it would also decrease program levels and overall competitiveness of the program. The university could also provide more institutional waivers, and that could help alleviate the strain on athletic departments. However, this seems unlikely because the university would ultimately be losing out on the tuition money from that student. The most popular solution to financial crisis, especially in Power 5 schools, is to decrease coaches' salaries. It would greatly alleviate costs, but it would be extremely difficult to remain competitive and retain the best candidate for the position. The only true non-invasive solution to the problem of athletic departments face is to increase donations. This is the only way to increase capital without pulling resources from another department or area. So that was my presentation. Feel free to ask me any questions, and I hope you enjoyed it.